thing I will not let happen on this show, on my show, is for all of you out there to sit and complain and get mad at me and mock me for being wrong. When I specifically told you all on Friday I was going to be wrong. I had zero feel for how this college football slate was going to go, and because of that, we were wrong in a lot of areas. But you know what? We strap on our boots, we put on our little working blue-collar jackets, we get back to work, and that's what we're here to do today. Welcome into the Spring Break College Football Show. Today is Monday, October 20th, fresh off an exhilarating Week 9 of college football. Lots to discuss on today's show. We are going to say our goodbyes to our dear friend Billy Napier. We are going to say some goodbyes in advance to a few other head coaches at major programs that, as of the time we're taping this, have not been let go. Some have been given assurances they will be coaching for the rest of the regular season. We're going to say goodbye a little bit earlier to them and try to connect some dots as to the future of this sport. We will recap the biggest outcomes from another massive slate. As I mentioned, 3 SEC matchups, all in the top 25. We'll break down everything that transpired, how we feel about those teams moving forward, and we'll try to have a whole lot of fun while doing it. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. To start off this show, last week, your boy was in a blender. He didn't feel good. As I sit here today, I don't know if I'm dealing with a writer's block. I don't know if last week just sucker punched me and I'm concussed and I'm just 4 days back still reeling from everything that I missed up or mixed up. As you can clearly tell, still splattered brains here. I'm even trying to write a rundown for this show, and for some reason the brain is just not functioning. So we're going to power through. We'll do it live. We'll try and just power through this episode and hopefully feel better for Wednesday and Friday. This is a 3-show week. Welcome in. That's a long-winded way. What? A few minutes in. Welcome into the Spring Break College Football Show. This is your favorite ball knower's favorite ball knowing show. If this is your first time and you're here on the YouTubes, first of all, thank you for paying us a visit. I'll try to be better this week. We will be. If this is your first episode, congrats. Because you missed all the losers last week. We didn't go over. I think we went 500, but the ones that we lost in dramatic fashion. So if it's your first time here, we've been great all season. We just had a bad week. So don't hit pause or leave this video or this podcast if this is your first time. You're like, man, this guy's done nothing through the first few minutes but complain about how bad he is at this. No, we're having a good year. We had a bad week. We're bouncing back. If you're here on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, show me some support. If you're listening, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, 5-star review, subscribe to those channels. Go over on my socials, Twitter, TikTok, @SpringBlakeCFB. Throw me a bone there. TikTok, we're on a chase to 1,000 followers. We started this season at 500. I think we're at like 910, 915 right now. I want to get that up to 1,000. I have a goal. By the end of the regular season, I want to be at 2,000. That's a big goal for just a couple months to go, but we're going to try and hit that. Please go and support this show there. Anything that you guys give to me in support, it motivates me. It fuels me to want to keep doing this even more so, even despite having really bad weeks and knowing I'm going to have to sit in front of this camera for an hour and just talk about where I was wrong the days before. So lots to discuss, plenty to get into, plenty of big games, outcomes, playoff positioning, all that fun stuff. But we are going to start in Gainesville, Florida, where Florida could have beaten Mississippi State by 1,000 on Saturday. It couldn't have saved Billy Napier from losing his job. Fired late Sunday morning. I jokingly say that this was a decision made weeks ago, maybe a week ago after Texas A&M. The whole letting him coach through this game, it was really just to give the interim head coach an extra week to prep for how to finish off the 2025 season because they are on their bye week. But yes, Billy Napier has been fired. He finishes at Florida with a 22-23 record over 4 seasons, 12-16 mark in SEC play. Here's where it gets even worse. So he's a 500 coach overall, below 500 in conference play. He's 5-17 when going up against ranked opponents. And equally as bad, if not worse, when going up against Florida's rivals, a 3-12 record against Florida State, Georgia, Miami, LSU, and Tennessee. Florida had some incredible highs under Billy Napier, but those highs lasted for 1 game, maybe 2 games, 3 if you were really lucky. But offensive inconsistency always had this team falling short of expectations. It was why they started so slow at the beginning of the 2024 season, where you start the year with Graham Mertz as your quarterback, and he gets banged up, and then, okay, well, we've got this phenom DJ Lagway. Maybe we can get some juice going. And they carried into some success later in the season. Then to start off this year, obviously the really bad loss to South Florida just snowballed into effect what was a really unfortunate season here in 2025. You get the win over Texas, but it still wasn't like this dominant win. They couldn't carry the success into A&M. They beat Mississippi State, as I mentioned in Saturday, send Billy Napier off with a win, but it was just far too inconsistent on that side of the ball. To be an offensive-minded coach, to be the play caller for this team, and to have a couple of good games, and then a couple of really bad ones, and then maybe one more good game, and then a few bad that followed after that. There was no semblance of development here in Florida, and that's really where things fell short for Billy Napier. One thing that I think was massive in Billy kind of dying on his own sword was his inability to give up play calling responsibilities, and he spoke about that in the preseason, about that he felt like he was giving his team the best chance to win as the team's play caller. I was frustrated throughout this season, their inability to commit to the run, to feed Jaden Baugh 25 carries a game, maybe not that many, but 20 to 25 carries a football game. You saw in the Texas game when they fed him against Texas defensive front seven, how they were able to push around a really talented group and how they looked better than they had all season. Meanwhile, in games against LSU, in games against Miami, again, still going up against good front sevens, but there was just an inability to commit to that ground game, which made life even more difficult for a young, talented quarterback, but inconsistent one in DJ Lagway. I felt like Florida's defense did a great job carrying them through certain points of the Billy Napier era, but when you had those offensive inconsistencies carry year after year, and then this season specifically, when the defensive injuries started really piling up, there was really only so much you could do, and you could really just see this team slowly start to fall apart. The Miami game felt like the first time where there was a lot of quit on that football team, where Miami just kind of dragged them around. And then in the second half of that Texas A&M game, I don't think that decision to move on from Billy was made in that specific moment, but if they were able to carry momentum from Texas into beating Texas A&M, you could start to feel like there was a little bit of life there. But after how things fell outside the first quarter of that game, you just saw a team kind of give up as they did against Miami. And to me, what just ended up being Billy's demise, just an inability to get things humming offensively, an inability to pass on play calling responsibilities to someone else on his very talented staff. This is a really talented football team. And I don't sit here on today's show as surprised as I was last Monday when Penn State decided to move off James Franklin. Florida had not come even close to meeting the expectations that the talent on the football team warranted specifically over the last 2 seasons, and that's why they're sitting here searching for a new head coach with half the season to go. So suddenly, just because of that, actually, you know what, before we go there, I do want to say one final goodbye to Billy. I'm not necessarily even, I'm a Billy Napier guy because I wanted to believe in this football team, because I believe in the talent they had. I didn't have like some super high attachment to Napier. When I started to watch how they rallied around him at the end of last season, I was like, this team really likes its head coach. This team feels it. And then this year you kind of just felt it, kind of fall apart. I enjoyed betting on you. That being said, I lost a lot of money betting on you, even this past week. I was like, you know what? Best bet, Florida, -9.5. They're going to send Billy off with a win because I knew he was going to be fired even before that. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I can give up the shtick now, picking them week after week, just because they were like my adopted team was frustrating financially and on the TikTok comment sections. But we could say goodbye to that. Billy, I think Billy Napier, before we move on, is a really nice guy, and I think he's a really talented coach. I'm sure he's going to get another look here at the G5 level or with another team that he will probably exceed expectations at. But this just wasn't the right things didn't go right for him in this opportunity. I hope he's given another chance to slowly churn out success elsewhere. Really nice guy. Team seems to love him, but just at the end of the day, the results weren't there. And you need results when you're in the SEC and you're a brand that Florida is. Speaking of which, you now have an elite job opening here that should be the most sought after job in the country. Florida has elite recruiting right in its own backyard, enough of it to consistently contend for national titles if you're just recruiting guys in your area. Now, you obviously aren't going to do that because they're going to go play elsewhere. You're not just going to solely rely on Florida, but you have enough talent in your own backyard where if you are dominant and you are, wearing the Florida brand with pride, you're going to be consistently in the top 5, 6 recruiting classes in the nation. And because of that, with good coaching, consistently contending, not just in the SEC, but for the national picture. It showed Florida the last few years a desire to pump more money into the facilities, into the coaching staff. Like, there is an increased buy-in over the last few years at Florida that I don't believe they had the decade that before it. So at least in the grand scheme of things, like, they put a lot into Billy. They're not just going to stop doing that now because it didn't work out. There is going to be an even bigger commitment to whoever they bring in as the next head coach, because you are going to be able to catch this and ride it into what's going to be a very successful era in Gainesville. It's still a premier brand. It's still in a premier conference. And because of all those reasons, I think you have every right in the world to take the most massive swings that I expect them to make. They are going to go at every big name out there. And the first one, everybody's talking about it, from Sunday night to Monday morning to Tuesday. Florida has to take its biggest swing on Lane Kiffin. I would do everything in my power to lure him out of Ole Miss until he either accepts that position with you or signs a fat Kurt Signetti-like extension with the Rebels. He is the guy. He's the guy that I look at across the landscape and say, this is the opportunity to elevate a guy that is doing so well at a place that has its limitations. Let's put our arms around you. Let's embrace you with a program that is of top 5, 6 caliber, no matter who the head coach is. And we're going to be the marriage that elevates Lane into this final destination. Lane Kiffin has shown us an ability to win at several different markets now, has grown both as a coach and a human being with each stop he's made along the way, from the NFL, back to the college ranks, back to the G5 ranks, now at Ole Miss. He has consistently shown us at every step of the way he is learning as a person and a coach, and is one of the best guys in the sport right now. I think he fits the brand of Florida very well, had some successful years down there at FAU, and I think in short time would elevate this team and program back into the national championship relevancy picture. Now, the issue is you got to make sure the timing is right. You have to be able to lure him away from what is a really nice job. Ole Miss isn't like, you're not pulling a guy in from Tulane. You're not saying, hey, let's give this young guy a shot. No, you're trying to pry away a guy who has consistently churned out top 10, top 15 teams over the last few seasons, teams that are flirting with the college football playoffs. Does he want to try and rebuild and reload at a new destination when he's already found himself a nice home here in Mississippi? That being said, I think Lane is well aware of the limitations that an Ole Miss program does present itself with. And I also think he understands that bold choices have to be made in your career if you want to reach your highest potential. It is a risky move. It's a risky jump, and there's a lot of uncertainty. You have no idea how that next destination is going to go. But Lane has shown us throughout his career that he is willing to bet on himself and what he's capable of doing if it better fits him in the long run. And I think Florida is a position that will do that. like I said, you have to go and exhaust all your options. He's the number one dude. He's the top guy right there. This isn't a Penn State type job where you're like, well, let's go take a look at the top G5 names. And okay, well, who in the ACC and the Big 12 has been doing well for a while? No, like your list has to start with the biggest fish. And there's a lot of reasons why I think Lane Kiffin makes sense for Florida. So that would be my top get there for the Gators. I think it makes a lot of sense. I get the reasons why Lane would want to go to Florida. There's obviously all the reasons why Florida wants Lane Kiffin. This does seem to be like the final boss for him, where he could fit with this program, stay for a really long time, and consistently compete for national championships. Now, if it's not Lane, say that he, by the time the show comes out even, or Tuesday or Wednesday, signs that crazy $12 million a year extension with Ole Miss for a decade, and you're just like, well, that's out the window. Where do we go now? I go to Lane Kiffin light. My second option would be Eli Drinkwitz, head coach for the Missouri Tigers. We'll talk about the Tigers later on in this show, I believe, their game against Auburn. But he's another guy that, to me, has exceeded expectations at a program that feels somewhat limited in what it can accomplish at its highest potential. He's been there at Missouri 4 or 5 years now, I believe, has consistently had some of those teams that you're like, oh, wow, Missouri started off 6-1. Oh, wow, Missouri just got that big win. Oh, wow, Missouri's ranked again. They keep cycling through players and regimes here, and the roster turnover hasn't made any bit of a difference. Missouri is a really good team this year, just had a really big win over Auburn in overtime, has a big one against Vandy this week, came close to beating Alabama. Eli is almost like he's not the plan B Lane Kiffin, but he's a good consolation prize, because I think you're getting a similar guy. He's been winning at a place that you shouldn't win at. He's been doing things at Mizzou that you shouldn't be doing at Mizzou at a consistent basis. He's young enough to where you're going to be able to hold on to him for a really long time. He's a good offensive mind. Drink makes a ton of sense. I think he'd fit the program well. I think he'd do well at Florida. And yeah, it's not like the flash that Lane is, but getting Eli Drinkwitz is a really good fit for the Florida Gators. A few other names that get tossed around. Alex Golish at USF right now sent Florida down its current spiral that led to this vacancy at the head coaching position. Has shown he's capable of winning in the state of Florida, recruiting in the state of Florida. I do feel slightly concerned. I'm not sure if Florida is ready to go down the same path that brought them Billy Napier. A lot of the time when programs make decisions like that, they don't want to go back to the same well they just went at. And if it's the hot offensive coordinator from the G5 level, Golish at least had shown as the offensive coordinator at Tennessee for a bit that it's like, oh no, he could win anywhere. Like, he will land an SEC job and do well at that raised level of competition. I just don't know if Florida is ready to just all of a sudden dip back into the same market that landed them Billy Napier in the first place. He's obviously a great coach. He's going to get a massive job this offseason. I just don't know if it makes sense, if the timing is right for Florida based off what got them to this point. I always mention, I mentioned Brent Key, Matt Campbell when talking about the Penn State opening last week. Both are more than qualified for this gig as well. You can throw in Jeff Brom from Louisville. Massive win for the Cardinal over Miami. Something about these guys, though, I don't mean to say that they're complicit or complacent. What's the word I'm looking for? They're happy where they're at. These three guys right now, Brent Key, I believe he's at his alma mater. I know for a fact that Jeff Brom is. They're over exceeding expectations at their places, but Jeff Brom, he's a made man in Louisville. He has the rest of his life made for if he just stays where he's at and continues to keep winning at the rate he does. I believe that all coaches are determined to take that next jump and to take that next step. But some of these guys, especially when you're coaching where you played or where you went to school, like, it would take a lot to leave. Florida is a lot. Florida would make a lot of sense for those guys to want to jump up there. But when we look at the Matt Campbells of the world who have turned down the NFL and have turned down other big coaching opportunities over the last decade, when you take a look at Brent Key and the success he's had at Georgia Tech and how happy he seems to be there, Jeff Brom as well, I don't know if that pool is going to be where you get your next head coach at. in Florida, but I do believe it's a very qualified group. I would try to. You just have to make sure that they are on the same page of like, yes, they're hungry for that next spot. One last name. It's a name that I'm seeing a ton of. I don't get the same juice from it. Jedd Fisch, current head coach at Washington, was just at Arizona a few years back. He replaced Kalen DeBoer, had to replace a lot. Washington's done well this season. Jedd Fisch, just, I don't know, it doesn't excite me the same way that some of these other top names would. A little bit older of a guy, feels a little bit more passive. He does have a lot of ties to the program. Brilliant offensive mind. Like, I get the reasons why Jedd Fisch should be in consideration for the position. It doesn't give me the juice to reinvigorate this program right now. He even feels a little stale in his second year at Washington. There's been some speculation he already has his eyes on his next move, whether it's a UCLA or might it even be Florida if he gets a serious look here from the Gators. But I don't know, like something about Alex Golesh or Lane, obviously, like that fires me up. Like I am getting this like young energy that's rejuvenating this program. And maybe that's just because Billy was maybe a little bit more of a quiet name and face as the head coach for Florida. Like I want someone that is just going to bring it. Jedd Fisch is a brilliant offensive mind. I get the reasons why he makes sense for Florida. Just for me, it doesn't excite me that much. It doesn't make me feel like, whoo, man, they did what? What a hire. I think it'd be safe, but I don't know if it's something that's really going to like push the envelope in Gainesville. So those are just the names that come to mind, the names that we see outside of Lane, including Lane. Make no mistake, this is the best job opening in the country. There's one of a few that have to open up for me to change my mind on that. But, you know, if Auburn opens up, I'm taking Florida. If Penn State's already open, I'd take Florida. If Florida State opens up, I'd still take Florida. Florida is one of the premier jobs in the country, and as of where it stands right now, the number one job for available head coach candidates. So those are my thoughts on Florida. Let's take a quick break. We obviously have to talk about all the games that transpired this weekend. I need some water. Make sure this camera's still rolling, so I'll talk to y'all in a second.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
So we obviously had a whole lot of games transpire on Saturday that were amazing results, some maybe a little bit more on the boring side. I'm going to start with the game that just captivated me the most, what got my attention for the full 60 minutes. Georgia, Ole Miss, Bulldogs win that one 43-35. Awesome offensive performances from both of these teams. Scores on every single possession through the first 45 minutes. I believe it extended beyond that because Georgia scored early in the fourth quarter. You just had blow after blow after blow after blow between these two teams. 861 yards of total offense, 55 combined first downs, 0 turnovers in the game. Early on, Ole Miss obviously had control. They took the early lead, 7-3, scored again. Like, Ole Miss was always ahead of the curve through the first three quarters. I thought they did a really nice job testing the lack of speed on Georgia's perimeter. There were a ton of end arounds, a ton of shots deep down the field on the perimeter. Georgia just didn't have the juice early on, and Ole Miss was ready for a track meet. I think their drive started, let me find it here. Ole Miss drive chart. Ready? Touchdown, 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 touchdown. 5 touchdowns on their 5 first drives. 4 of those drives went for 10 or more plays. It just never felt like Georgia, through the first 3 quarters, was going to be able to find an answer to stopping this attack. They just looked slower. They looked less physical. There was just, you just felt like Ole Miss had an answer for every single thing Georgia tried to do, and it played out that way. Because as I said, through the first 3 quarters, there were just no stops. It was dominant. So how did Georgia respond? Well, they just turned up the heat themselves, but in their own way. This was what was so interesting about watching those games, is that Ole Miss was sustaining long drives and putting up points, but they were doing it more by explosive passes, runs to the outside, a little bit of trickery here and there. Georgia just did Georgia football, man. That's what it always comes back to for these Bulldogs. Outran the Rebels 221-88 on the day. won the time of possession battle by 15 minutes, scored on every single drive in the game outside of kneel down. So, Ole Miss was putting up points quick. Georgia was saying, we're going to control this game by our own tempo, by long sustaining drives. We're going to make it so you have to respond. You almost have to be perfect because we're going to chew the life out of this game. We're still going to put up points with you, but we're going to make sure that this clock is moving and moving because we think there's going to be a point where you're not going to be able to respond. And you know what? That happened. Ole Miss in the fourth quarter couldn't get it done. 2 3-and-outs, a turnover on downs, and that was all Georgia really needed to take advantage and squeeze the life out of this game. Georgia, I've said it all year. I said it last year. The talent isn't there, but you cannot let this team hang around. They've now overcome 2 14-point deficits this season, almost had a third against Alabama. They came up just 3 points short in that game. The competitive nature of this football team outweighs almost anybody in this sport right now, and then they still have enough talent to hang around and make it count when their backs are against the wall. It just felt in the fourth quarter defensively from Georgia different. Because like I said, through the first 45, Ole Miss was running a track meet. But then all of a sudden, when that fourth quarter started, you just felt like Georgia got 10 times faster, 10 times stronger, and all of a sudden it was like Ole Miss just got blindsided by it. They were like, wait, what was that? Wait, it's now 2nd and 13, 3rd and 17. What are we doing? Like they had been doing things so well for so long that when they were hit with a little bit of adversity, it was a wrap. It was a wrap. Georgia gained total control after Ole Miss first 3-and-out. They looked nothing like they did the first 3 quarters. Their inability to run the ball played a huge role in that too, not being able to be a little bit more balanced offensively, because a lot of Ole Miss's runs in the first 3 quarters were kind of gimmicky, I'd almost say. But when it came time for Georgia to just strap the fuck up, they did in a big way. Like I said, forced 2 3-and-outs, another turnover on downs to seal it. And then offensively, man, Gunnar Stockton is not by any means a perfect quarterback. He's not going to be going 1-1 in the NFL. He's not a first-round pick. He's probably not a second-round pick. But that dude is a fucking gamer, man. Gunnar Stockton, 26 of 31, 289 through the air, 5 total touchdowns on the day. It could have been a couple of big throws to his top playmakers. He fed the tight ends so huge in that game. Some really nice runs to move the chains. Like, he just does everything you need out of your quarterback to just give this offense an identity, some juice. Like, you can't sit back there and say, like, yeah, well, if Gunnar Stockton needs to throw for 400 yards, if you need him to sit back in the pocket and throw 55 times for 400 yards to keep pace, like, you might not feel great about that, but he brings this style of football and this I just will put the team on my back mentality that you can never count Georgia out offensively because of it. I mean, to get the day that they had offensively, where you're not, and we'll talk about Ole Miss in a second, but you don't get stopped once. I don't care what we might think of Ole Miss's defense after this game. In an SEC football game, in a ranked opponent, you didn't get stopped once on the day. The balance that they had in the ground game was fantastic. Again, Georgia, I said this a few weeks ago, Georgia doesn't reinvent the wheel. They just stick by what they've always been. The talent might not be there, but they're going to run the hell out of the football. They're going to win the time of possession. Their quarterback's going to make a couple of big plays when they need it. And they're going to let you mess up. And that's what happened. Georgia's defense rose to the occasion in the fourth quarter. Ole Miss made a few mistakes. Chambliss made a couple of bad throws late. And that was the difference in this game. And when you look at it now, Georgia's sitting there with just 1 loss on the regular season. They have a couple of tough games remaining on the schedule. But no, this is a team that will be in the picture for an SEC title. They'll be in a really great position to make the college football playoff. And I just really worry about having to face this team. The talent disparity across college football is as level as it's ever been. But when you've got a Kirby Smart-led program, they're gonna hang around. And if you don't beat them by 40 and run them out of the building, they're gonna find a way to win. So really impressed with Georgia. Huge result there. For Ole Miss, the offense was awesome. It really was. But the problem is that their defense right now is so ineffective that the offense has to be perfect. And they were perfect for 3 quarters. But when the fourth came around, they made a couple of bad throws from its young quarterback. There were a few mistakes made late in the game, and the defense just didn't have the juice. You have to remember with this defense at Ole Miss, they replaced all but one starter from last season. You're like, okay, yeah, but it's a program, college football, they overturned it. Ole Miss was a top 5 defense in the country last season. And then they replaced all but one starter. That means when you go up against some really good teams, that's your fatal flaw. And that's what happened, because Georgia shouldn't be that successful on you. No team in this sport should score on every single time they have the football outside of kneeling it down when they beat you. That shouldn't happen no matter who you are. But that's what happened on this past Saturday. Hard to win games when that happens. And I was incredibly impressed with Trinidad Chambliss through the first 45. He had a couple of missed throws late, and unfortunately his defense put him in a position where he had to be perfect, and he wasn't perfect. So Ole Miss handed the loss, I believe the first of their season. Yeah, so they're 6-1 now. Both of these teams are. Schedule plays out kind of nice for Ole Miss if we're just taking a look at big picture stuff. They have a good chance to be in that same conversation that I said with Georgia, where you're still flirting with conference title picture, you're still flirting with an at-large bid, because the schedule, they've got a tough game in Oklahoma this weekend. Really excited to see how that one goes. Oklahoma, we won't get the chance to talk about them today, but dominant win over South Carolina. How much of that is just being South Carolina? I don't know, but they look good. They have a big game against Ole Miss, Oklahoma this weekend. And then the rest of the schedule, it's South Carolina, it's Florida, and it's Mississippi State. I think there's a game in there against the Citadel, but you're talking about a team now that could finish the regular season with just one conference loss. And if that loss is to Georgia, you're going to be putting Ole Miss in the college football playoffs with an at-large bid. So it sucks. It shows you that you aren't that you are a flawed football team, specifically on that side of the football. But how many offenses are going to be able to keep pace with you like Georgia did? On the schedule, I don't see many. I don't think Oklahoma will be able to. I don't think they have the balance. So as long as you can keep playing that style of football, you're going to be able to get into that conference title playoff picture. And then it just depends on who you match up against, because your offense can go with anybody, I believe. But you just need to make sure that you're finding opponents that maybe aren't as talented offensively or as dialed in on that side of the football. So really big game between two very good teams. We're going to take another water break and continue on talking Vandy LSU.
My name's Blake.
So we're getting my losses out of the way early on this show. I was wrong about Georgia Ole Miss. Honestly, spread-wise, that just pissed me off that Ole Miss didn't cover after how great they looked through the opening 3 quarters. But I picked Ole Miss. I was wrong there. I was wrong about this one too. Vanderbilt takes down LSU. The final score is 31-24. Very mad at myself in this game because I kind of flipped what I believe in this sport and ignored my favorite system in college athletics. I love taking teams that are talented and have an identity over teams that use talent as an identity. And that's what happened here. Vanderbilt has talent, has its separate identity. LSU's been relying on talent to be its identity all season long. And of course, Vanderbilt takes down LSU in what felt like a more convincing final than just a 7-point swing. It felt like Vanderbilt was in control outside of maybe the opening drive. They felt like they were in control for this full game. Vandy has such a good awareness of who they are as a football team, refused to abandon it in this past game. 239 rushing yards, dominated the time of possession battle, 8 of 16 on 3rd and 4th downs. Diego Pavia was great, 246 yards of total offense, 3 total touchdowns. Did a nice job keeping LSU's offense off the field, held them to just 100 rushing yards on the day. Flat out dominant in the trenches. It just felt like LSU was not able to generate any sort of movement, both offensively, defensively. And as highly as I felt about LSU's defense over the years, that aggressive run of the football style leaves you very open to getting burned by mobile quarterbacks. And I'm sitting here on Monday's show telling you like, oh, I should have seen all these things coming because I knew this about LSU. Like I knew LSU wasn't a great football team, but I still picked them because I thought it was just a get right spot. Under Blake Baker, their biggest issue defensively, because they haven't had many, has been mobile quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe tore him apart last year. I believe, was it Jackson Arnold? There was another mobile quarterback last year that really gave him some fits. Diego Pavia crushed him on the ground today. It felt like any time that there was a third and long situation and Diego's back there passing, it was 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Oh, there's 15 extra yards and you just take off and run. LSU couldn't do anything to stop them on that day and then didn't have enough responses when it was all said and done. These teams aren't really that far apart talent-wise at all. It's just the fact that Vanderbilt knows who they are as a football team made them the victor on Saturday. And Clark Lee continues to deserve so much credit for the work he's done here. Something that will definitely get him massive interviews this offseason. I feel like I should be mentioning him when we talk about the Penn State opening and we talk about the Florida opening. Like, he is one of the hotter names in the sport right now with the work he's done here at Vanderbilt. Maybe I want him to stick around. I want him to be the guy at Vandy because it'd be cool for Vandy to just have a guy. I don't know how realistic that is, but really impressed by him and his football team. They are so dialed in as to who they are, and that outweighs just pure talent. It just does. Massive games on the schedule for Vandy still. They've got Mizzou this weekend, hosting Mizzou. College game days coming to town. The Fall Don't Lie tour coming to town for those ball knowers out there. Huge game against Mizzou. I think very highly of Mizzou. Both of them I view very similarly to one another, so that'll be a fun game to break down. Still have games against Texas, Auburn, Tennessee. You can throw Kentucky in there. I don't know if the ceiling is like, hey, look at that. Vandy made it through that schedule and they're playing for a conference title. I don't know if that is the ceiling for this team, but I do believe that they are a class above a few other teams here that just rely on pure talent. We saw like them take down LSU, and that's a huge statement win. I know LSU isn't like this coming off a national championship season or has been one of the biggest contenders over the last 3 years under Brian Kelly, but it's still a really good program that always has talent. And getting a win like this for Vanderbilt is massive. Now, for LSU, it feels like such a massive waste of time and money and resources in the Brian Kelly era. His first 2 years here, Brian Kelly's first 2 years here, you spent wasting away really talented offensive players. Jaden Daniels, talented wide receivers. You wasted away a Heisman season from Jaden in 2023 because you had one of the worst defenses in the sport. You just couldn't play complementary football. So Brian Kelly comes in, he's got Ferraris on offense, but it doesn't mean shit because he can't stop a nosebleed defensively. Okay, so what do? You hire one of the best defensive coordinators in the sport. Blake Baker is awesome. You get that side of the football patched up. They've been great defensively this season, outside of a couple outcomes. Like they did a great job against South Carolina recently. They did a good job against Clemson in week 1. They did their parts against Ole Miss and Vandy. They tried to do it there. So you get one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. You get that side of the football patched up for the most part, but now you can't play a full 60 minutes of competent offense, and your inability to run the football, something that should never be the case in the state of Louisiana. The fact that you cannot have a strong group up front on the offensive line and a stable of capable running backs is inexcusable for a team playing in the state of Louisiana. So now, because you've spent the last 2 years fixing the defense, now the offense can't do it. And I just continue what to say. It's a wasted era here for Brian Kelly. I don't know to what extent this goes, because Brian Kelly is a really good head coach. He's making a hell of a lot of money. But it just feels... It's never felt like a real fit here. I've never viewed LSU over the last few seasons as like this national title contender. I know a lot of people have, but when you look at just the holes on the offensive line and with the play caller and with the running backs, it was like do you really think they're going to round into form into being the team in college football? I've never felt that way, especially because of their being led by Brian Kelly. Like I've never been a Brian Kelly guy. I never will be a Brian Kelly guy, but it feels now that we're in this fourth season and we've just spent going back and forth, hitting the ping pong across the table, being like, well, the offense is good now, but the defense is bad now. Well, the defense is good now, but the offense is bad now. We're just wasting years here. If I may, I don't know if I want to do this. Okay, I'm going to do it. I want to manifest something on this show because, as I mentioned, I'm a believer that Brian Kelly is not the guy for LSU. I don't know what it has to take for that decision to be made. I don't know if it ever gets made. Maybe he beats Texas A&M this weekend. They carry on a really great regular season, and we're all sitting here being like, oh, how did this happen? I don't think that's going to be the case. Maybe it is. But if it isn't, and if at some point you reach the decision that Brian Kelly is not the guy for LSU moving forward, I'd be welcome to a change. I thought that the fit was weird from the start. Haven't liked it since it's happened. I don't think he's going to be the guy that elevates LSU in this current landscape of college football. Because Brian Kelly has been there, I've also never really had a ton of interest in the program itself. I've kind of drawn myself to other coaches and other programs, despite this being one of the more exciting brands in college football. However, I also think that this is one of the top 3 to 4 programs in the sport when it's at its peak. Like outside of Alabama, outside of Ohio State, maybe historically you go Notre Dame, LSU is in that top tier. Like, no, this is the football school, the football program. So I want to manifest for this job to open up. I want to just start manifesting the Brian Kelly era to come to an end, hopefully by the end of this season, because I do think there's a coach out there that I love to death. I believe he is, I've said it, I think he's the best coach in the sport. I think he's the best motivator in the sport. I believe that if you were to tell me you can take one head coach today for the next 20 years, I would take this guy. I think the timing is right to pry Dan Lanning out of the Pacific Northwest and land him a job as the head coach of the LSU Tigers. So much has to happen for that to transpire. As I said, Brian Kelly, you got to move on from him first. There has to be an opening at LSU. I think LSU is a job opening that Dan Lanning would take. And that might sound crazy because 2 years ago, he just turned down the Alabama gig to re-up at Oregon. Oregon gives him all the money in the world. He's got all the backing in the world by Nike. Like, why would he leave it now after saying no to Alabama 2 years ago? Well, one, I think it's a little bit different being the guy that replaces Nick Saban versus being the guy that can reinvigorate football at Louisiana State. I also think that he would have a real nice itch to get back into the SEC, and people might say like, oh, the Big Ten. The Big Ten's great. No, the SEC is college football, and LSU is one of the 4 jobs in this sport that I think anybody in the world would take a meeting on or would listen to. It's Alabama, OSU, maybe Notre Dame, and LSU. I think if LSU is to open up, I think the timing would be right. Dan Lanning has done a remarkable job at Oregon. He has a position that many people would not want to leave, and he probably doesn't want to leave it himself. I think with the limitations this team has potentially had when it's come to big games or when it's come to college football playoffs, maybe he hits the playoffs this year and it's another 1 and out, and you're like, just something is missing there at Oregon. It might just be regionally. It might just be he needs to get back down south, get back into the SEC. And man, could you imagine what we turn ourselves into next year in the SEC? Kirby Smart at Georgia, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, Dan Lanning at LSU. Like, that fires me up as a football fan. So I'm just manifesting. I'm just sitting here thinking of like, what would my dream for college football be? As much as I love the Ducks, I almost wore my Ducks cutoff today because they looked awesome against Rutgers. I just picture a world where Dan Lanning's back in the SEC, leading the Tigers, going up against Kalen DeBoer again, Alabama, LSU. Like, that would just fire me up. He seems like such a good replacement for Brian Kelly because Brian's, older. He's not as passionate. He's this little curmudgeon. Dan would be a total reversal in terms of personality, in terms of fit. Like, I just think he fits that school and that brand and that conference very well. And it's not to say that I want him to leave Oregon. I don't want Oregon fans to hear this and be like, how could you even suggest this? He just turned down Bama for us. I think the timing is a little bit different in this situation. And I think the general vibe over it would be that I think he'd take it. So again, I'm just manifesting something I want because I'm not a fan of Brian Kelly and I'm not a fan of LSU. But if we're to get down here and LSU loses another one or maybe another 2 games on the season and they sit there in panic mode and make the decision to move on from Brian Kelly, I think Lanning would make the move. I think Dan Lanning would make the jump to LSU, and I think it'd be a hell of a college football fit. So those are my thoughts overall on LSU right now. It's incredibly frustrating to have a historic program like this just being kind of dragged along, knowing that the potential is just like the potential at LSU every single season should be, okay, well, we're going to contend for the SEC title and we're going to contend for the national championship. You're 4 years in now under Brian Kelly and you haven't sniffed it. So those are my thoughts on that. We're going to take another break. We've got some more games to discuss. Long episode coming in today, but we will be back in just a minute.
Blake. What?
All right, so we're going to go 2-minute drill for the rest of these games, for the rest of the topics on today's show, because I don't think we need to be pushing an hour and 30 minutes. We're not there yet, but I'm going to refuse for us to get there. Alabama marched on past Tennessee Saturday night. 37-20 was the final score. Big takeaway for the Crimson Tide. I felt this way. It's been brewing for 5, 6, 7 weeks now. Outside of Ohio State, I just don't see a team playing better football than the Crimson Tide. And that's scary when you think of the things that this team still needs to figure out. But let's talk about the good. The offense continues to shine. Ty Simpson, 19-29, 253 yards, 2 scores. Ryan Williams, huge bounce back from a 0-catch game against Missouri. 5 grabs, 87 yards. They somehow found 120 yards on the ground in that game. It did not feel like it. And that continues to be the one, like, if we could just get this right for Alabama, it'll totally unlock. You're starting to see growth. You're starting to see performances over 100 yards rushing. I still think there's another level to this ground game, and I think that once that gets figured out, there might not be a better offense in the sport. And defensively, Alabama fans, I say this every week, they get so mad because it's like, well, how can you let a Tennessee team put up 410 yards on you of total offense? You're Alabama. How does that happen? You're Alabama. How do you allow 142 rushing yards and the occasional 15, 20-yard carry? I get it. It's not Alabama of Nick Saban. It's not Nick Saban's Alabama where the defense is lights out every single game. But you know what's great about this defense? It steps up when it needs to, tightens up in the red zone, held Tennessee to 40% score rate on the weekend. They have now the 3rd best red zone defense in the country. So again, Vandy, Mizzou, Tennessee, yeah, you moved up and down on them in between the 20s, but when it got to the red zone, Alabama tightened up, and that made the difference in all of those games, especially against Tennessee, the most pivotal play of the game, the 99-yard pick six to send the game into halftime. 14-point swing and a 17-point final score killed all momentum the Vols were trying to build going into the break there. I get it. You're not harassing the quarterback for 60 straight minutes, and teams are putting up 20-plus points on you. The defense makes plays when it needs to. I think Sam Womack deserves a ton of credit for the development they've seen. Like that game against Florida State, which is just the biggest anomaly in this sport now, is Florida State has lost 4 straight conference games and just lost outright to Stanford as 17.5-point dogs. But we're not here to talk about FSU. They're over there. They're in my other bedroom. They're that far away. You can't even see them on this camera. We're here to talk about Alabama. It's just they continue to develop, impress me, get better with each passing week. And I say Ohio State's the number one team in the country because they've given me no reason to believe that they aren't. Alabama's as close to a complete football team that I've seen next to the Buckeyes so far this season. And it's a little bit of everything. It's the potency of the wide receiver room. It is the offensive line. It is Ty Simpson looking like the best quarterback in the game right now. There are so many reasons to buy into what Alabama is delivering offensively to where you can still, like I said, be patient with the defense. It's still getting better. Like, I know it still allowed a ton of yards and Tennessee put up 20 points. It's still better than where it was a month ago. And so I think you're just seeing a team slowly fall into form of being one of, if not the team to beat in the sport. And for Tennessee, I continue to see a team that I always considered a notch below the elite of college football, the elite of the SEC. And that's fine, because that's what we should have expected from this team coming into the year. I don't think it's hard as a fan. If you're a Vols fan, you get caught up in the fact that your team has looked awesome offensively at moments and has really beaten up on some good teams and has stayed close with Georgia and close with Alabama. And you're like, why aren't we just beating those teams? It's like, well, you're not supposed to even be playing them close. Like, I'd be happy with the results. And that's tough to say because you're coming off a playoff season and you still have a ton of talent. Like, it's tough to just accept who you are. But Tennessee right now is a tier 2 team in the SEC that is rebuilding a lot of parts of its roster and was supposed to be worse than what they are right now. So, yeah, I know that Joey Aguilar has exceeded expectations, and that's given you a little bit more life, a little bit more reason to believe. But he's not going to be perfect. Pretty inaccurate day, 28 of 44, 268 yards, the bad interception on the pick six, which to me was more of a play calling thing, which happened a few times in that game and has been a key issue for Tennessee, and maybe their offensive struggles at times is on a play calling front. You want to blame that. They lost Alex Golesh a couple of years ago. He's now the great offensive mind at USF and will probably be back in the SEC this year. So 2 years in a row, you lose Alex Golesh, you lose your quarterback, and you bring a new one in the spring. I don't know, man. I expected Tennessee to be a tier 2 team in the SEC, and they've been a really good tier 2 team in the SEC. I know that it is tough in college football to just take a full grasp of the big picture, especially when you're a fan of that team. But look, you played close with Alabama for a bit. They slowly pulled away because Alabama's just a tier above you right now. So I don't think anything less of Tennessee. I kind of think more highly of them than I did entering the season because of how close they have stayed with those great teams. So those are my thoughts on that game. We'll keep moving around. Where do I want to go to next? Do I want to jump around? No, we still have to talk about Notre Dame USC. So Notre Dame beats USC 34-24. That game almost goes exactly like I thought it would. I thought USC would put up a really good fight because I thought they were a much more improved team than people had been giving them credit for. People were hanging on to the loss against Illinois. You beat up on Michigan. That people left that game feeling worse about Michigan than feeling good about USC. I've been this whole while believing USC is a much improved football team than people want to realize. That being said, I also thought Notre Dame was that times 2. Like, I thought Notre Dame was also not getting enough credit for how good they've become over the last month to 6 weeks of the regular season. So I thought Notre Dame was going to win. Now, I picked the Trojans to cover. They did because I grabbed the line when it was 10.5. So shout out Lincoln Riley's crew on that. I thought both teams looked really good, and a messy game kind of just fell way to the team that was bigger and faster and stronger, and that was Notre Dame. They outran the Trojans 306-68. You got some bad play calling from Lincoln Riley at certain points, some bad throws from Jordan Mailata. It was a messy game in unfortunate circumstances, and that favored the team that could really run the football well. And that's what happened for Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love, Jajarian Price were fantastic. CJ Carr played a bad game. I think that's the thing that really trips you up the most is like CJ Carr was not at his best, and you were still able to beat the Trojans by 10 points. I have been a firm believer for not just a month now into the preseason and through the first 2 weeks, like Notre Dame is one of the 5 best teams in college football. They just lost 2 very close games to 2 very talented teams at the start of their season by a combined 4 points, and people wanted to dismiss who they are as a program. They have always been a top 5 caliber team. They're also just young and figuring out a lot of new parts, and you're seeing those parts grow and expand, and now you're sitting here in the middle parts of the regular season saying, yeah, if they take care of business, they'll be in the college football playoffs, and they'll be one of the very few teams that you do not want to see in this sport. I just don't. I think defensively they're getting better with each passing week. The ground game is ferocious. The offensive line is better. And yeah, CJ Carr didn't have his best game, but he's had a few really solid games. Maybe you blame it on the weather and playing in the rain. I feel great about Notre Dame. USC, look, it's you can't stop the run. That's still your biggest issue. You couldn't run the football well when it came time to run against a talented defense. And because of that, your season's going to be limited. This is twice now. They're 2 losses. Illinois, Notre Dame, they got destroyed in the trenches. And you can hope that 2 losses on the regular season doesn't end things for you. But when you look at the rest of the schedule and you're like, oh, that's Oregon on there? Oregon knows how to run the football well. They just ran it around Rutgers for 60 straight minutes. I think you're going to be just outside the playoff picture when it's all said and done. I see Oregon doing the same exact thing that Notre Dame just did to you in the trenches, that Illinois did to you in the trenches. Again, it's hard to be happy with those results when they happen. But if you finish the end of the regular season and you're a 3-loss team for USC, can we just have some faith in incremental growth and believe that next year or the year after it's really going to start clicking for this team? Not everybody in this sport can be great. And I think the improvements that USC has made over the last season and a half are substantial and they're impressive. They're not going to win it all. They're probably not going to make the playoffs. But if you're finishing on that just outside the playoff picture this year, gives me a lot of faith that things are heading in the right direction. Something that I already believe is happening. Hopefully the national picture, the national media, everybody that watches on Saturdays will start to believe that as well. Because I don't look at a 10-point loss and be like, man, USC is really far away. No, I thought there were moments of that game. They kept things close. They looked great early on. And Notre Dame, when the game got messy, they were the bigger, stronger, faster team, and they slowly pulled away. So those are my thoughts on that game. We are going to go now to Texas. Got to talk about Texas for a second. So Texas escapes Lexington with a 16-13 overtime win over Kentucky. And that is despite being outgained 395 to 179, losing the time of possession battle by 20 minutes, running 31 fewer plays than the Wildcats, and committing double the amount of penalties. Texas got dominated by Kentucky in this game, yet the final score sits at 16-13. Texas moves along now in their season with just two regular season losses, being to Ohio State, who looks like the best team in the sport, and Florida, who beat them by 6 or 7 points late in that game. The offense was horrendous. The offensive line went back to playing really bad football. The run game couldn't get anything going because of it, and Arch was under pressure the entire game, still missing on throws. They confuse me because I am to believe that Texas has one of the more talented rosters in the sport. I believe the Texas defense has more talent than all but maybe 1 or 2 defenses in the country. And they're sitting here with 1 conference loss. They got a couple of big games late in the season. They got to go and they got to take care of Georgia. They got to take care of A&M. Those are really tough games. You're sitting here just waiting for it to click. And that's what's really frustrating about Texas right now is I had been patient with Alabama after week 1. I was like, you know what? They're going to get things humming. They got things humming. I thought that Ohio State, I was like, yeah, the offense has been a little slow. They're going to start to open things up. They've started to get that done. There have been a few teams in this sport now where you're like, just be patient. You're not who you are in week 10, what you are in week 1. Sometimes it just takes things to get going. This hasn't been going outside of 1 game against Oklahoma. I don't get it. I don't know what this football team is trying to be. I'm worried about their game against Mississippi State this weekend. Like, that's a team that could put up points and can make things really tense. Like, Kentucky just, Kentuckied themselves away from that game. Mississippi State, they're frisky. They're fun. They've been competitive with just about every team they've played this season. I believe Texas is really playing with fire here, and we've given teams a lot of time to slowly wake up. That alarm's got to go off now. They got to figure that out, because if you don't do it now, you got a tough game against Vandy. Like, I would look at that Vandy-Texas game just like I do LSU-Vandy, where it's just like, okay, Texas, yeah, we know you have a really good defense, but Vandy's going to punch you in the mouth 45 times, so you're going to have responses, and I don't know that they're going to be able to. So, really gross game there from the Longhorns. I don't know what to think of them. I still want to believe in them. I still want to believe that they can get it figured out, but they have shown us nothing through 9 weeks of the regular season to warrant being someone that you're like, oh no, they'll have a shot at the playoffs. They'll have a shot at an SEC title. I got to see it. I've reached that point. I feel like by week 9, I should have 2 to 3 games of tangible evidence that says, yes, that's who you could be at your peak. I don't know what this team is at their peak right now, and that's why we have to sit here and poo-poo them for a little bit. Is there anything else that I want to say? Auburn lost again, this time to Missouri, this time in overtime. Ugly game, defensive battle. Auburn gets out to a lead in the third quarter. Mizzou comes back, sends it into overtime. I believe Auburn's kicker missed a few field goals in this game. Auburn's in a really weird situation now, because it's funny hearing Hugh Freeze talk about this team, and he seems to put a lot of blame on the mentality of his players and not understand that you kind of have to embody the persona of your football team. And that was what was really frustrating about the way he handled the overturned touchdown call in that game against Georgia. He just gave up after that play. He pouted for the next 30 minutes. He went off the attack offensively and just allowed Georgia to slowly come back and override that outcome there. I just don't see fight in Hugh Freeze. I don't see 4 quarters of consistency. And then he goes to the podium after and kind of questions the character of his roster. I don't get that at all. It seems like you should be the one leading that charge, leading that mantra. And he's now 0-4 to start SEC play. I think he's started each of the last 3 SEC seasons 0-4. Here's my thing that I want to say about Auburn, and it's a bigger picture, a bigger story about college football. I think there's going to be some massive jobs that open up between now and the end of the regular season. You're like, hey, Blake, yeah, Penn State, Florida, Auburn will probably be on there too. Like, totally. No, there's going to be some big ones. I think Auburn will be lost if they lose to Arkansas this weekend. I think Arkansas, if they push the pedal on Auburn's defense, I don't know how the Tigers are going to be able to find a ton of responses. I think Arkansas is going to beat Auburn this weekend, and as a result, Hugh Freeze will lose his job. I've already hinted at what I want to happen in Louisiana with the Tigers. I don't know if it'll happen, but like that's one I've got my eye on. If things just continue to unravel for the Tigers, I could see them deciding to move on from Brian Kelly. Florida State came out the morning that we're recording this and said they're going to wait the regular season out to see how things finish as it pertains to Mike Norvell and his future there. I don't know, man. He's lost, 8 or 9 straight conference games, lost outright as a 17.5-point favorite to Stanford after losing to, I can't even remember who he's lost to at this point. It's been 4 really bad losses in conference play. The only interesting thing about Florida State and its job is that the coaches they have in place to move on and to start a new era, you're talking upwards of close to $100 million, because Norvell has a crazy buyout at $59 million, I believe. The other coaches on that staff, like, that's a big choice to make. My big point being, Florida's open, Auburn will probably be open, Florida State might be open, and LSU might be open. I just want to say one more time, this is why I'm worried about Penn State and whether or not they may have rushed their decision to let go of James Franklin. I think Penn State will land an awesome head coach. I think whoever they hire, it'll be a really good hire. It'll be one of the top available names because that's a great program. But there could be 3, 4 different jobs that would demand more attention than Penn State does right now. I love Joel Klatt. He's a great guy in the sport. He said that Penn State is a more desirable job over Florida right now. Man, I get you work for Fox in the Big Ten. That is blatantly false. I think that Auburn's bigger than Penn State. Florida is certainly bigger than Penn State. FSU is bigger than Penn State, and so is LSU if it opens up. I'm just a little worried. I wonder if you could have just let James Franklin get into the offseason and say, hey, let's change our defensive coordinator. Let's change up a few of those coaches. Like, do what they did with Mike Norvell the season before. Because at least James Franklin has the 12 years of rapport and trust within that program. I'm just worried that when it's all said and done, Penn State isn't going to get the top guy or the second top guy. They get the 5th guy, and the 5th guy is great, and he'll be a good head coach. But is the 5th guy better than the guy that you had? That's all I'll say, because I think there's going to be a lot of great jobs that open up between now and the end of the regular season. How do we do? I think we're just barely over an hour. I think that's great. I tried my best. I don't know if we made a whole lot of sense on today's show. As I mentioned, got just real bad writer's block right now when trying to fill out outlines. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully the clips do well and we can get better. Maybe I just need a good night of rest for Wednesday's show. Here's the plan for the rest of the week. Wednesday, I want to do a little bit of a just rehash my playoff picture, my champion, my Heisman, all that stuff. We haven't really had the chance to do that. I want to do a mid-season adjustment and give you my thoughts on where the rest of the regular season is going to go. We'll do that on Wednesday. We will do some the week 9 or week 10 Spring Blake Sweet 16 poll. We will do some game previews, and we'll finish up game previews on Friday. It's a 3-show week. I'm very happy to be here, very excited. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, the socials at Spring Blake CFB. If you're on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We got a couple more subscribers. Shout out to you guys. I don't know if you're friends or if you're strangers, but hopefully you like the show. Spotify, Apple, subscribe, 5-star review there as well. I love you. I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday. Peace.